Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds, and welcome to my book garden. I'm Rosebud Reads, and this is Thousand Autumns, Book 4, Session 5. It's also the final live stream of Book 4 before we move on to our final book in the Thousand Autumns series, which is very exciting. It's weird because it's felt like both a long time reading this series but also like no time at all, but I'm excited. Hello, Chi Chi Kiki, how you doing tonight? But yeah, I'm trying to think of if anything exciting or good or bad has happened recently. You're doing good. I'm glad to hear it. I think the most exciting thing that's happened is I literally went and worked out at the gym today. So I'm like, woo, health. Oh, and super excited. This arrived today. Actually, it arrived yesterday, but I get to show it off today. Hello, Annika. And yeah, it is, because it's been a while. I'm trying to get more consistent. But yeah, so pretty. Our boy. Oh, I will turn on normal lighting so we can actually appreciate the beauty that is the book. So, of course, Wei Wuxian when he's in his emo baby girl era, his magnificent baby girl era. And on the side, we have Wen Qing. And we have Swabian. And Chenking. Yeah. I think Swabian doesn't get enough love. Because, you never see anyone really using Swabian in their cosplays, which makes sense because there's two different versions, but still, Swabian deserves love. Oh my goodness. It's so pretty. Look at that. I love also that, they have the accents, the color accents of, muddy water, because lotuses grow in muddy, brackish, well, not brackish, but muddy water. If it's too clean water, it can't grow. So I think that's awesome. And then, of course, we have MXTX's signature, I think. The OG cover. Oh, Wenning. And, of course, Lanzan. Oh, I love this. Oh, I love it. Right? Okay. Let me see if there's any extras back here. Yes. Have blood pool. God, it's just so pretty. And there's, it almost looks like there's gold leaf in there. It's not, but that is such a cool detail. And then, oh my goodness, this is cool. Look at that. That's so cool. Right? The art is so cool. And to think he just let himself be pinned and kissed like that, to think his knees would still be this weak from it. I love that out of all the quotes they could have picked, that is what they chose to put smack dab on the back of this book. That's great. Yeah, that was kind of how I felt with the Heaven Official's Blessing hardcovers. Like, I was like, I'll buy them eventually, and then I was like, I'll buy them now in pieces. But Modao Zushi, I couldn't buy them in pieces. Well, I mean, I couldn't not buy them when they came out because it's my love. But I totally get it. They're a commitment, especially when you already have the book. Like, I usually would not be the special editions, but these feel so special because, like, they really are special editions. Like, once they're gone, they're gone. Like, they're so pretty. Like, I'm a sucker for a gorgeous book. I freely admit it. I'm such a sucker for a gorgeous book. But yeah. Does anyone have any exciting weekend plans? I originally was going to be playing board games this weekend, but people are sick, which, I mean, I was sick last weekend, or not last weekend, the weekend before that when we were supposed to do board games, so 'tis the season! But yeah. I need to go grocery shopping this weekend. That's my exciting thing. And clean bathrooms. So exciting. Yeah, I think so. I have that new PS5, so I will probably be playing some Where Winds Meet. I might look into Obscure 33, Claire Obscure 33, Expedition 33, I think it is. My friend has been raving about it, and actually is going to cosplay something from it. So they're usually very discerning in regards to their cosplays. So their seal of approval means quite a lot. So I might take a look at that. It's on sale right now, like 20%, but 20% is still 20%. So, but there's always books, if nothing else, or just because. But yeah, I hope everybody else can have a nice, relaxing weekend too. Maybe I'll even take my dog for a walk. He'd like that. It's been pretty cold around here, so I might not like that, but he'd probably enjoy it, at least even if it's just a short weekend walk. But, I know it's a little early, but why don't we just go ahead and get to it? Let's see. I'm going to say 8:30. Because by then, I'll actually have the book open. I'm just excited that my sniffle is, like, finally, like, it's been a work in progress, but, oh, focus on me. Thank you. Like, it feels like it's actually getting somewhere. I can see my silver hair, my little pokey silver hair. We're going to tuck that back in. Okay. So, last time, we actually ended on a rather exciting point. So, we found out that Hulugu wasn't as dead as he first appeared when he turned up at the Sword Trial Conference, had his big evil villain moment, except he's been pretty chill overall, other than the fact that he's like, hi, Shen Qiao, I respect your old master, but you killed one of my disciples, so I gotta kill you. Like, usually I'd leave it, like, at kicking her ass, but, like, my disciple wouldn't be able to die peacefully and stay peacefully dead if I didn't kill you. So, it's gotta happen. And Shen Qiao actually put up one hell of a fight, and people actually started coming together to like give him time to run, like not defeat Hulugu together, but like at least give Shen Qiao a chance to go. Hello, Momars Rover. Welcome. How you doing tonight? But yeah. Even Yipi Chen stepped forward, even though he was seriously injured by Hulugu before. But they're all kind of standing up to at least give Shen Qiao a chance. And then, at that moment, a sneer exploded in everyone's ears. This is someone who belongs to my venerable self, and you think you can kill him as you please? Shocked, Yu Yan yelled, Shizun! Yeah, we are at such an intense spot. Shocked, Yu Yan yelled, Shizun! As soon as he said this, everyone knew the identity of the newcomer. But they only saw a phantom appear out of thin air, like an immortal descending from the heavens, untethered and unrestrained, elegant and carefree. He didn't meet Hulugu head on, as everyone expected, though. Instead, he grabbed Shen Qiao's waist and simply swept him away. He did it with such swiftness that even Hulugu couldn't stop him in time. Everyone was dumbfounded. So that is where we ended on Tuesday, which is pretty funny, that instead of fighting Hulugu, as people were expecting, Shen Qiao was like, nope, this one's mine, yoink, and literally yeets out of there. Not that I think it's going to be super relevant, but since we haven't mentioned it in a while, injustices to service worker count is 5, 10, 15, 20, 22, and only one justice for service workers as we continue onward. All right. 106, nighttime chat. No one had expected Yan Wushi to suddenly appear. He'd uttered such dramatic words, and everyone assumed he was about to duel Hulugu to death. Instead, in the blink of an eye, he simply grabbed Shen Qiao and ran, even ignoring his disciple. That's right, his disciple was there, Yu Xingyan. Xuandu Mountain's A Rainbow Stretches Across the Heavens was unparalleled, but while Huan Yue's sex Qinggong wasn't as famous, Yan Wushi vanished in an instant as soon as he started moving. Even Hulugu was left in his dust, never mind anyone else. Of course, it was also possible that Hulugu had never anticipated meeting a martial Grand Master so shameless. Probably. Shen Qiao hadn't anticipated it either. He was still injured, his blood roiling, meaning it was difficult for him to move rashly. Yan Wushi carried him for more than 10 miles, but his steps remained as stable as if he were walking on flat ground, without any turbulence whatsoever. His face was relaxed, and the hint of a smile even hung on his lips. Clearly, he found this effortless. Shen Qiao finally collected himself to try and speak. With difficulty, he swallowed down the glob of blood in his throat and then coughed twice. Put me down. Yan Wushi was unperturbed. What's the hurry? I just left the mountain. If Hulugu catches up, wouldn't my entire trip have been in vain? There was a beauty in his arms, so what was the harm in carrying him another few dozen miles? Oh yeah, he is definitely shameless. It's not that Yan Wushi had suddenly become an upright gentleman after meeting Shen Qiao, but more that he understood Shen Qiao's personality well. Hello, Truffle! Welcome! We only just started, and we rehashed how Yan Wushi popped in, yoinked Shen Qiao, and now they're running away from Hulugu and the Sword Trial Conference. I hope you're doing well tonight. The Taoist master could be coaxed, but not cowed. If he tried to force him, he could forget about getting anywhere with him in this life, but he couldn't rely only on coaxing either. This beautiful Taoist was pure-hearted, ascetic, and serenely detached. He never indulged in any worldly desires and had cultivated himself into keeping his distance from the secular world. But even the most steadfast of Palmas grass would be powerless to move bedrock. So that a reference to a very old and famous poem, The Peacock Flies Southwest. In it, the newlywed bride exalts their marriage in love, describing herself as the pampas grass, flexible yet steadfast to her husband's bedrock, solid and immovable. Yan Wushi is poking fun at this analogy. Oh, no worries, Truffle. Literally, the only thing you missed is I got the Grandmaster Cultivation Book 3, the special edition, and we were showing it off a little and talking about weekend plans. So if you want to watch later, that's all you missed. But I'm glad you're here. However, Yan Wushi thought himself completely beyond the likes of dull bedrock. For if he wanted to, he could pluck even the stars from heaven. Good. Shen Qiao was somewhat at a loss for words. I thought you were going to fight Hulugu. Yan Wushi smiled. If I fight him now, I fear that I still will come up a little short. Why should I waste energy on a poor outcome? If I am to fight, it must be when I'm confident I'll win. My venerable self does not engage in meaningless actions like drawing water with a bamboo basket. He never shied away from telling the truth, but even this time exuded Yan Wushi's trademark egotism and imperiousness. Shen Qiao didn't reply. In truth, the last fight had sapped all his strength and he'd suffered internal injuries. He was beyond exhausted. Before he could realize it, his eyes slid shut and he fell into a deep slumber. Yan Wushi looked down, a smile on his lips. He held the man to himself and walked steadily out of Qingchang town, headed northeast. Huddling and packing, going on a snowshoe trip on Monday. Snowshoe? I mean, that's super cool, but like, dress warmly, I guess. Have fun. It had been a long time since Shen Qiao had last slept properly, the way a normal person would. That wasn't to say that he didn't need sleep. It was just that for martial artists, sleep was training, and training could also double as sleep. By circulating true qi throughout their bodies, they could cultivate and rest at the same time. Though Shen Qiao cared little for success or failure, he also understood the principle that being strong meant he wouldn't be at the mercy of others. Ever since he'd reshaped his foundations, he'd been training diligently. When resting at night, he'd relax by meditating. In his recent battle with Hulugu, he'd exhausted his internal energy, draining his heart and mind both. For the time being, his danshin was completely empty. At night, he'd usually spare a portion of his awareness to watch the outside world, but he couldn't do it this time. The moment he closed his eyes, he lost all consciousness, entering a strange and surreal dream. Nice. I'm glad to hear you got a lot of warm stuff and are bringing along what sounds like a pretty reliable jacket. It's apparently going to be awful tomorrow. My mom was watching the weather and she was like, yeah, you're going to need to leave early. It's supposed to be awful. I was like, oh, great. Thank you. Like, oh, winter. When he woke up, he was already lying on a bed. He turned his head and saw that it was dark outside the window. The only light came from the flickering flame of a few candles on the nightstand, illuminating the room in a faint glow. Before Shen Qiao could frown and expel the memories of his dream, a teasing voice came from next to his ear. Which wonderful dream did you have that you're still savoring it after waking up? Only then did Shen Qiao realize that something was wrong. The object he was leaning against was clearly not a pillow, but Yan Wushi's thigh. He'd woken up with his head pillowed on Yan Wushi's thigh. No matter how composed Shen Qiao was, a realization like this was still unsettling. He braced his arm against the bed, ready to get up, but Yan Wushi pushed his shoulders down. You still have internal injuries, so you shouldn't move about recklessly. We've been blessed. They're so hot. So hot. Like, I'm gonna scooch them closer. Like, damn. I love that we finally get to see embarrassed Shen Qiao, where it's like sweet embarrassed. I mean, wouldn't you be smug? Like, he earned that smug right there. And Shen Qiao looks like someone waking up to a steak. Yeah, he does. Oh shit, does he have another streak on the other side? Oh man, I'm gonna maybe add another streak. You know what? I like the wig how it is. Yan Wushi finally got his man. It is a great picture, Chi Chi Kiki. There was indeed a faint pain in Shen Qiao's chest, and his qi circulation was sluggish. But that didn't mean he lacked even the strength to sit up. He insisted on propping up his torso and moving himself to the edge of the bed. When he felt a solid surface against his back, he gave a sigh of relief. In the end, leaning against the bed gave him more peace of mind. Yan Wushi observed him with great interest. What kind of dream did you have? Your face is flushed like a peach blossom, and your eyes are so dewy. Shen Qiao was speechless. Upon hearing this description, those who didn't know better would think he'd had a wet dream. Yan Wushi reached out to touch his face. Your face is so warm, he said. It must have been a wet dream. Did you dream of my venerable self? The corners of Shen Qiao's mouth twitched. No, I fear I must disappoint sect leader Yan. It was a dream where I fought many people. Even after waking up, I feel exhausted. Yeah, I can see why he would be tired. The corners of Shen Qiao's lips twitched. He could never say that Yan Wushi was among the people he fought. Who knew what the other man would say? However, he'd clearly underestimated how shameless this Huan Yue sect leader was. You still underestimate. However, he'd clearly underestimated how shameless this Huan Yue sect leader was. You still underestimated how shameless this man is? Shen Qiao, are you really going to do that right now? Yes, he is. Always. Even without him giving an inch, Yan Wushi could still manage to say the most embarrassing things. Fighting? Fighting where? Was it in bed? If you continue to say such frivolous things, Shen Qiao said angrily, I won't speak to you anymore. Xiao was always threatening him, but he was so soft, it was completely ineffective as a deterrent. Yan Wushi laughed and said, Ha 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 ha. All right, I won't say any more, really. Then you should say something instead. I'll let you talk first. Shen Qiao composed himself and said, How long was I asleep for? That's easy to answer, said Yan Wushi. An entire day and night. Shen Qiao was slightly surprised. He hadn't expected to sleep so long. His injuries wouldn't recover for a while, but after waking up, the pains of his body were greatly lessened. It seemed as though Yan Wushi had helped while he was asleep. I keep forgetting that this guy makes Wei Wuxian look like the picture of restraint. Yeah! And I was kind of thinking, like, for the speech aspects, for the shameless aspects, it's interesting because my brain went, what about Lan Wangji? Because, like, of the two, he's the one who breaks his restraint more often in that sense. But I digress. Shen Qiao, no, I did that. He cupped his hands. Thank you very much, Sect Leader Yan. In the future, if Sect Leader Yan needs anything, as long as it isn't criminal or inhumane, Shen Qiao will definitely do his utmost to help. Didn't we learn before about offering such a blatant and open statement? We did not. Then he thought about how absurd and unreliable the other man's words and actions tended to be, and how staggering his behavior at Bixia Sect had been. Feeling uneasy, he added, It also cannot be anything too preposterous or offensive to public sensibilities. Yay, more absurdities with soup. He learned a little. Though Shen Qiao wasn't the leader of Xuandu Mountain Sect any longer, he was still one of the world's top 10 martial artists, grandmasters. Combined with his moral character, a promise from him was worth more than 1,000 gold. Yan Wushi smiled, but lightly declined the offer. No need. I already collected my reward just now, so you need not be so courteous. Besides, with our relationship, you don't need to behave like a stranger with my venerable self. What relationship? Why don't I know? Shen Qiao was dumbfounded. Yan Wushi must have spent these years cultivating the thickness of his face on top of his martial arts and sect administration. Yan Wushi looked at him with a bright smile. Is Qiao thirsty? Shen Qiao involuntarily replied, I am not. Thank you, Sect Leader Yan, for your concern. I thought so, said Yan Wushi. While you were sleeping, I already fed you some honey water. Shen Qiao had a bad feeling about this. How did you feed me? Yan Wushi gave him a strange look. By placing a cup against your mouth, of course. How else should I have fed you? Before Shen Qiao could answer, an expression of dawning understanding appeared on his face. Did you think I fed you mouth to mouth? Qiao, you used to be such an upright gentleman. When did you become so vulgar and indecent? Shen Qiao said nothing. He had already been rendered speechless by this man. Even with how well-mannered Taoist Master Shen was, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. Yan Wushi even consoled him. It's not your fault. I already told you that Hihuan sect is full of bad people, and that's why you shouldn't mingle with that trash. Like those demonesses, Yuan Shu and Bai Rong. Just stay away when you see them in the future. My Qiao is a pure and spirited beauty. How can I let them tarnish you? Not like the reputation of your Huanyue sect is any better than that of Hihuan sect. Also, what do you mean, my Qiao? Who's your Qiao? Shen Qiao furiously protested in his heart, but he knew he wasn't Yan Wushi's match in a verbal dispute. If he made one retort, Yan Wushi would have 10 more waiting for him. Before, he'd been injured and in a day's slumber, so there wasn't much he could do. But now that he was awake, Shen Qiao's first thought was to worry about the people still on Qingcheng Mountain. I wonder how Sect Leader Xiao and the others are doing. I'll go back tomorrow and check. Yan Wushi sneered. Hulugu was targeting you. The moment you were gone, why would he pay any attention to the rest? As long as they didn't rush to their own deaths themselves, that is. With how proud Hulugu is, there's no way he'd go out of his way to kill those who are worthless in his eyes. I mean, that's a plus, technically. Hulugu was conscious of his status as a Grand Master, so he considered murder and slaughter beneath him. However, Duanwen Yang and the Hihuan sect, who were trying to profit off disaster, weren't as easy to get rid of. Still, that was within Chunyang Monastery's territory, and Shao Qi Ying and the others weren't powerless children. If they couldn't even defend themselves from that, there'd be no place for them in the Jianghu anyway. Oh, hello, Esper Lady. Welcome. You missed a little shamelessness and a fantastic picture, which we're close enough. This is the picture you missed. Yan Wushi yoinked Shen Qiao, took him down the mountain. Then Shen Qiao woke up and Yan Wushi was shameless. So that's basically all you missed. He is he twirling his hair? He is twirling his hair. Nice catch. But yes. And then Shen Qiao was basically like, what's happening? Do we know? Are the other people okay? And Yan Wushi's basically like, dude, Hulugu is there for you. He doesn't care about anybody else there. And oh my gosh, this curl is going to drive me crazy. Oh my god. That's basically it. Stay over there. Thank you. This is going to drive me nuts. There. It's fine. Yeah. Very interesting. Yu Shengyan is still on Qingcheng Mountains, Shen Qiao reminded him. Yan Wushi was even more direct. If he can't handle even this tiny amount of trouble, he's not qualified to be my venerable self's disciple. In Yan Wushi's eyes, the incompetent would never be worthy of his attention. Counting decades into the past, there'd been one exception in Shen Qiao, but there was only one Shen Qiao. No one else deserved any extra concern from him, even if they were his disciples. He'd already taught his disciples his skills. If they needed his protection and everything, why bother wandering the Jianghu? They might as well bash open their heads and die. Harsh. It was clear that Shen Qiao didn't agree with this view of his. On a rational level, he agreed with Yan Wushi's words, but while Shao Qiying, Li Qingyu, and the others might be able to protect themselves, Fan Yuanbai and Shou Yishui were far less skilled. If a fight really did break out, their masters might not be able to protect them in time, and they'd inevitably be injured. Yan Wushi saw that Shen Qiao's mind was wandering, so he reached out to pinch his cheek. When can you change your bad habit of worrying about everyone in the world? He scolded. You're injured. If you go back, you'll only be a burden. And you still want to save people? Besides, an entire day and night has passed. Even if there had been a fight, it'd be finished by now. What's the point in going? Shen Qiao was caught off guard by the pinching and instinctively leaned back to avoid him. Sect leader Yan, please have some self-respect. Yan Wushi was all smiles. Ah, Qiao is so unreasonable. I've already hugged, caressed, and fed you. What part of your body is left for my venerable self to touch? What's wrong with letting me pinch you? I can see that you're not like that boudoir girls who apply makeup and powder, but your cheeks are as smooth and delicate as theirs. If you dressed up as a woman, you'd surely be a first-class beauty. I don't think he's going to take that as a compliment. Just guessing. Shen Qiao is currently thinking about proper and serious matters, so he took Yan Wushi's words as nonsense and let them flow in one ear and out the other. He frowned a little and said, Sect leader Yan was like a prophet when he said that Hulugu might still be alive. I had a hard time believing it then, but it really came true. Hulugu has once again appeared in the Jianghu while my Shizun has already passed. Looking at the world now, no one is capable of defeating him. The Gok Turks have grown close to Yuan Yun, and Yuan Yun has been conspiring with Hui Huan sect and the Buddhist discipline. The Sword Trial Conference came to an untimely demise and collapsed entirely, and Chunyang Monastery was met with a crisis. I fear that the peaceful days of the Jianghu are no more. Why are you worrying so much about others? Said Yan Wushi lazily, leaning on the bed. Isn't the decline of Chunyang Monastery a good opportunity for Xuandu Mountain to make its comeback? With your current strength, you could have flattened UI a while ago. Storming into Xuandu Mountain and taking back the sect leader's position wouldn't be difficult at all. Why do thankless work for others? If you want to do it, I will help you. Shen Qiao glanced at him, then finally, having endured it for so long, he couldn't take it anymore. If you want to talk, just talk, he said helplessly. Can you stop putting your hand on my thigh? It's incredibly undignified. If not for his injuries and how he was sleeping against the wall, he would have long rolled off the bed. Yan Wushi patted him twice and chuckled. Oh, so this was actually your leg. I thought it was a cushion. He reached under the bedding and pulled out a cushion from next to Shen Qiao's leg. Then he placed his hand on top and patted it some more. So shameless, thought Shen Qiao. Yan Wushi's a special breed. Also, totally forgot to do this. This is a chill stream, which means I will be chatting with the audience, my lovely chat, the book, and myself. If that's not your cup of tea, that is totally okay, but you might not enjoy this. I mean, you picked an interesting place to start, considering this is the last stream of book 4, but no judgment. Also, I am not sponsored, and I do not own anything. The only thing I own is the literal physical copy in front of me and my time, and sometimes not even that. I knew I was forgetting something. Okay. 3630. All right. 107. Beloved. In the end, Shen Qiao didn't return to Qingcheng Mountain, if only because Yan Wushi had been correct. By now, a day and night had already passed since the sword trial conference. Any conflict would have long ended, so it would be useless to rush there now. Many sects had already left the mountain, one after another. He asked someone for information and was told that after Yan Wushi had taken him away, Hulugu left as well. However, Duan Wen Yang hadn't. He stayed behind to help Hehuan sect against Chunyang Monastery. So I was watching Master of the Flying Guillotine, and I realized where Yan Wushi's laugh comes from. It's the same laugh the villain of the movie has. Honestly, I just thought, what's an egotistical, slightly evil laugh? And kind of gave it to him. Kind of was pulling a little from the Donghua, which he's got a great laugh there, too. The villain of Mystery of Chess Boxing has the same laugh, and I'm pretty sure it might be the same dude. It's also just a fun, kind of kooky laugh, so I enjoy doing it, which is part of the reason I do it. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, cool. But Chunyang Monastery were no pushovers. Yipi Chen was injured, but the remainder, including Li Qingyu, Gu Hengbo, Xiao Qiying, were not that much weaker than Duan Wen Yang, even if they didn't place in the top 10. And on seeing the biggest threat gone, most of the people who'd come to participate in the Sword Trial Conference were unwilling to throw away their reputations by fleeing. Naturally, they had to help Chunyang Monastery, and thus a brawl had ensued. Yuan Shushu was at odds with Sen Jinxing, so her faction didn't try very hard. She even sabotaged him several times during the scuffle. In the end, while Chunyang Monastery did sustain damage, Hehuan sect hadn't gained much for their troubles either. Neither side ultimately came out on top, and both had suffered great losses. Of course, quite a few lives were lost to this fight, but in the Jianghu, your life was the least valuable thing you had. It was no exaggeration to say that the Jianghu was a dog-eat-dog world. Those who were unskilled and died to others had no one else to blame. If their descendants were powerful enough, they could go seek revenge and kill that enemy, and there was nothing an outsider could say. These were the rules of the Jianghu. The one closest to Shen Qiao was naturally his shimei, Gu Hengbo. Shen Qiao had practically raised her from childhood. She was skilled, and she wasn't stupid. If she couldn't defeat an enemy, she knew to run. so Shen Qiao didn't worry about her. As for everyone in Bixia's sect, only Fan Yun Bai and Shou Yishui were likely to be in danger, but to Shen Qiao's great relief, he heard someone leaving the mountain say that there were no casualties from Bixia's sect. I mean, they finally got lucky there. There was one more reason Shen Qiao did not go back. Yan Wushi had received a letter from Chang'an. It was a letter pleading for help, and it was sent by Yan Wushi's eldest disciple, Bian Yanmei. Since the death of Yuan Yang and Yuan Yun's subsequent ascension to the throne, Huan Yue's sect in Chang'an had been in a state of suspicion and apprehension. Bian Yanmei had previously received orders from Yan Wushi to pack up at once if the situation looked dire, leaving behind their superficial connections for Hehuan sect and the Buddhist discipline to skirmish over while their own people went into hiding. When Shen Qiao had fought his way out of the siege by armed troops with Yuan Song and Duoyan, it was partially due to Bian Yanmei's efforts that he had been able to escape without any soldiers in pursuit. However, the person seeking help in the letter was not Bian Yanmei, but Puliuru Jian. Puliuru Jian's eldest daughter was married to Yuan Yun. After Yuan Yun ascended the throne, she became the queen, thus making Puliuru Jian the imperial father-in-law. One would expect that his life should have become more prosperous, but the reality was completely different. The last time Shen Qiao was in Chang'an, he'd already heard about Yuan Yun's absurd deeds. Now, when he heard that Puliuru Jian was asking for help, he was still somewhat surprised. Yuan Yun wouldn't even spare his own father-in-law? Yan Wushi chuckled. Yuan Yun dared to kill even his own father. What's a father-in-law? He'd almost forgotten about it. Shen Qiao frowned and said, Yuan Yun committed patricide because he couldn't wait any longer and wanted to ascend early. But what's his issue with Puliuru Jian? If the emperor wants to kill someone, he must believe that they deserve to die, said Yan Wushi. All his reasons and justifications are just excuses. Puliuru Jian comes from a wealthy noble family. His father followed Emperor Taizu from Shao in insurrection and setting up the new regime, and he also earned a great deal of prestige and influence within the military. These have passed into Puliuru Jian's hands as he excels in administration. Now he already has a small faction within both the military and court, though it hasn't grown to the point that he can threaten the imperial authority. Which emperor could remain indifferent to this, let alone a crazed lunatic of an emperor? Yan Wushi possessed no trace of reverence for the imperial authority. He'd called Yuan Yang by his name back then, and now he was even more scathing towards Yuan Yun. He sighed again. Ah, Qiao, with your personality, it's fortunate that you weren't born into an official's family. Otherwise, how would you be able to contend in court with all its political infighting? I fear that you'd have been gobbled up until even your bones were gone. This was an oblique way of calling him stupid, but it didn't anger Shen Qiao. Instead, he smiled. If it's my personality, forget about contending in court. Even as a sect leader within the Jianghu, I still fell to the schemes of others. Yan Wushi smiled brightly. Now you're just belittling yourself. Your personality is intrinsically unsuited for playing mind games, but you have your own strengths. Though you're no longer the sect leader of Xuandu Mountain, there are still many people who wish to associate with you. What they see is your person, not your status. However, even if you're still easily susceptible to scheming, that's not a problem either. You have me, after all. With my venerable self watching out for you on the side, you need not fear being deceived by others. Yeah, but what about you? So in the end, this man just wanted to praise himself. Shen Qiao was somewhat at a loss for words, and his hair stood on end beneath his clothes. He quickly switched back to the original topic. So what exactly is Puliru Jian asking for help with? Yan Wushi carelessly said, Yuan Yun is suspicious of his daughter, so she's been taken hostage and is trapped inside the palace. All comings and goings in the Su residence are being monitored by the Emperor's spies, and the potential destruction of his clan depends on the Emperor's whims. Puliuru Jian himself has a guilty conscience due to his actions. Why wouldn't he be afraid? Yuan Yun indulged himself in pleasure, and the various absurdities he'd committed after his ascension to the throne needed no mention. First, he'd killed Yuan Xian and the others, so that he could eliminate the relatives of the imperial family who might threaten his claim to the throne. Now that those threats were dead, he passed the throne to his son, Yuan Chan, so that he could continue living a life free of restraints while still manipulating the court from behind the scenes. He was reaping the benefits of being an emperor without having to bear its responsibilities, nor endure remonstrations from his ministers. He'd killed 2 birds with 1 stone. He was very pleased with himself for this move, but he was deeply mistrustful as well. After eliminating the threat posed by the imperial family, he began to suspect the more capable officials who might have the ability to revolt. Puliuru Jian, being the imperial father-in-law and pillar of the nation, became the first target. He stepped down so he could play around. Yeah, basically, Truffle. Kind of fucked up. I mean, very fucked up. I mean, he killed his family. But, he's kind of crazy. So, Yuan Yun took extra care of him, and now he couldn't eat during the day nor sleep at night. There was a blade constantly hanging above his head, and his heart was plagued with worries. Shen Qiao had met Puliuru Jian several times before, and he had a good impression of the man's frank, upright nature. He'd also learned after the fact that his escape from Cheng'an with Yuan Song might not have gone so smoothly if not for Puliuru Jian's efforts. Buddhism placed a great deal of emphasis on the concept of karma, but Taoism valued it as well. If you owed someone a favor, you must find an opportunity to repay it, otherwise it would hinder your cultivation and state of mind. But helping someone was just one part of the whole. There were many other matters that needed clarification. Shen Qiao wasn't a fool. He could understand the interplay between benefits, interests, and losses. He just wouldn't use that kind of thing to harm or scheme against others. Then he'd send a letter requesting help, which Bian Yanmei delivered to you, which indicates that Huan Yue sect has a fairly good relationship with Puliuru Jian, he said. Previously, you told me that Yuan Xian could be an enlightened ruler, but when Yuan Xian died afterward, you didn't seem particularly sad. I trust that you had already found a recourse. Is Puliuru Jian that recourse? At present, Yan Wushi was renting a courtyard from an inn in Su province, and Shen Qiao was recovering from his injuries there. He'd always had a quiet temperament, and he rarely went out while he was recuperating. Most of the time, he took advantage of the good weather outside by bringing a book and sitting under the grapevines in the courtyard. When he didn't speak, the scene already looked like a gorgeous painting, let alone when he did. The sun's rays spilled down, shining through the grape leaves and dappling Shen Qiao's body. Even the contours of his cheeks and neck seemed to be cast in a delicate and soft glow. Beholding this scene made one's heart itch to pick up this beauty and bring him home to hide him there like a treasure, so that in the future only they'd be privy to seeing him. Yan Wushi was a man who'd experienced all kinds of beauties. The fact that he could lose himself by simply watching Shen Qiao showed that Shen Qiao himself was truly extraordinary. But Yan Wushi concealed his thoughts well. As these wanton desires swept through his heart like a storm, his gaze simply lingered on Shen Qiao for a moment before he lazily smiled and said, "That's right, but your use of the word recourse here is incorrect. Even if there were no Puliurujian, Huan Yue's sect would not fall. But if Huan Yue's sect didn't exist, it'd be much harder for Puliurujian to achieve his goals. That's why Huan Yue's sect is his recourse instead." Yeah, wanton desires. He's feeling very noodly. Haha. Shen Qiao trusted Yan Wushi's insight when it came to politics, but that didn't mean that he thought the man was infallible. In the past, he'd also approved of having Yuan Yang and these two turbulent times by unifying the lands, but only because he'd met Yuan Yang himself. Dying of laughter. Seriously, I hate when people mix those two up, though. Yeah. Wanton and wonton. It matters! He'd seen that the man was indeed a great leader, possessing both talent and vision. Even if his rule was severe, he was accomplished when it came to state and military affairs both. Because of him, the wars in the north had ceased, giving the citizens respite, and the north itself had been unified by his hands. If he'd had more time, he might have completely put an end to the hundreds of years of turmoil. It was a pity that these unforeseen circumstances had arisen. Yuan Yang had been wise and brilliant to the very end, but his son was a misfortune. Yan Wushi was faster than anyone else when it came to adapting to and taking advantage of a situation. He'd even abandoned Yuan Xian in the blink of an eye to collude with Puliuru Jian. But how could he be certain that Puliuru Jian would make for an enlightened ruler in the future? "Aren't you worried that this man might be overly ambitious and end up failing instead of succeeding?" thought Shen Qiao. His expression said he didn't quite understand what Yan Wushi was thinking. Seeing the doubt written all over his face, Yan Wushi slowly said, "Qiao has his own judgment. I can speak thousands of words, but as you've yet to talk to him, you wouldn't believe me. He has Yuan Xian's abilities, but none of his shortcomings, and he even possesses the ambition that Yuan Xian lacked. Back then, Yuan Xian didn't dare to revolt, and so his entire family was annihilated. Puliuru Jian is not the sort to passively wait for his death. However, he's currently in a very disadvantageous situation. If I can help him, Huan Yue's sect will certainly receive great benefits in the future. More importantly..." Shen Qiao saw that he still wished to say something. Thinking that there must be a more important reason that he hadn't stated, he put down his book and listened attentively. Yan Wushi slowly uttered the latter half of his sentence. "More importantly, I find him quite pleasing to the eye." Shen Qiao couldn't help but stare at him. Yan Wushi smiled. "I think that it's better if you don't stare at people in the future," he said. "If you want to stare, you can just stare at me. Otherwise, people will think that you're flirting with them." When had it started? When had Yan Wushi begun to always use this teasing tone when talking to Shen Qiao? Shen Qiao thought back for a moment, and in the past, when he'd been blind and grievously injured, Yan Wushi would carry him in and out of places, purposely leading others to get the wrong idea. Of course, he'd also been all intimate words and inappropriate actions then, wanting everyone to think that the former Xuandu Mountain sect leader had become the Huan Yue sect leader's kept man. Now his words were even more intimate, but he didn't make any overt moves in front of others. Instead, he only grew so talkative and prone to laughing when in private. Shen Qiao had initially paid no attention to these subtle changes, but at this point he couldn't keep ignoring them. He rubbed between his brows. He felt like everything was a mess. Yan Wushi instinctively reached over and pressed his palm against Shen Qiao's brow, the other on the back of his head, preventing his escape. "Don't you Taoists value the concept of following one's fate?" he said. It was as if he could read Shen Qiao's thoughts. "Are we not a match made in heaven, destined to be? So why does Ah Qiao look so troubled?" "Following one's fate is a Buddhist saying," said Shen Qiao. "We only talk about following nature's course. Besides, we're destined for calamity. That's all we are destined for. Please don't throw words around so indiscriminately, sect leader Yan." He went to brush Yan Wushi's hand away, and in an instant the two of them had already exchanged several blows. Yan Wushi had no self-awareness when it came to taking advantage of others while they were sick, and in the end he directly tapped on Shen Qiao's acupoint, then pulled the beauty into his arms and stroked him. With a gleeful smile, he said, "Good destinies, awful destinies. They're all destinies nonetheless. Could it be that even after cultivating for so many years, you're still obsessed with superficial qualities? Since Chifeng Gui is already dead, I'll have to straighten your thoughts out on your Shizen's behalf." Shen Qiao, actually, this is a match made in hell. You're not wrong, Trouble. Once he finished, he lowered his head and kissed the beauty thoroughly until Shen Qiao was out of breath, all while enjoying his entire body through their clothes. Though he'd gotten quite a sweet deal while Shen Qiao was in his day's slumber, Yan Wushi had always been a proud man. If he were to take advantage of someone, he wanted that person to be fully aware of it. Even more, he knew exactly how far to take things, always stopping at the fine line between what Shen Qiao could tolerate and what would make him explode into a rage. This level of precision was truly infuriating. I mean, okay, pause. I appreciate that he has standards about taking advantage of someone, but they're still really shitty standards and tiptoe towards the line of, like, not okay. Like, he is playing with fire on that hair-thin line right there. Like, mixed feelings. Like, at least he's self-aware. Alright. Once he finished, he lowered... no, we read that. Shen Qiao's face was flushed red as he panted. The flush was out of rage, and the panting was due to the lecher's harassment. Yan Wushi's gaze swept over the lips he'd just sucked on, which were glistening and blushing even redder than the rest of Shen Qiao's face. His heart was satisfied, and he finally said in a leisurely tone, "You see, you're feeling it too, so why torment and repress yourself? Why continue denying it?" Shen Qiao didn't speak. Clearly, it wasn't that he couldn't speak, but rather that he was so angry he refused to. So points for self-awareness, but Yan Wushi is still way out of line. Yes. Also for not taking advantage of him while he's sleeping. Because, like, that'd be even more out of line. Yan Wushi smiled again and said, "Ah Qiao, when you were in trouble, I traveled thousands of miles just to save you. Isn't that enough to prove this venerable one's feelings for you?" He spoke with such tenderness, but he refused to unseal Shen Qiao's acupoints. He knew that the moment he unsealed them, Shen Qiao would immediately leave. There was no way he'd be here still listening to his nonsense. "I know you bear many grudges against me due to what happened in the past," Yan Wushi went on, "but towards you, my heart has already changed completely. As the saying goes, given enough time, one can see someone's true feelings. Haven't you realized it as well? Shen Qiao calmed his breathing and said coldly, I have never seen sect leader Yan's heart before. How should I know whether your heart's changed completely? Yan Wushi grabbed his hand and brought it to his own heart. He said softly, if you don't believe me, you can dig it out and see for yourself, then you'll know. From today onward, this is all yours. The corners of Shen Qiao's mouth twitched as the saccharine word sent a wave of chills down his spine. He felt that this man's face was thicker than the Great Wall. He'd never be able to match Yan Wushi here, no matter how he tried. If he attempted reasoning with him, Yan Wushi would fire back with his own twisted logic. Shen Qiao couldn't be Yan Wushi's match here, even if he grew 10 more months. Let me go first, he said. No can do, said Yan Wushi with a smile. As soon as I unseal your acupoints, you'll run away. I don't want to force you too much, but you shouldn't get any notions about going our separate, happy ways. Even if the person I want hides in Chi Finggui's grave, I will dig them out. Shen Qiao turned his face away. This humble Taoist is one who cultivates the Tao. I will never involve myself in romance, nor get married for my entire life. Yan Wushi said, We're not talking romance. You're too superficial. We're cultivation partners who share the same Tao and walk the same path. I never intended on marrying into your family by force. If you prefer, you can marry into mine instead. It was like he was teasing a cat, wanting to see its hackles rise before smiling and soothing it. He undid Shen Qiao's acupoints and said, All right, I was just joking. Why are you so angry? Back to the main point. Puliuru Jian has run into a big problem this time. Whether he's an enlightened ruler or whether you're willing to support him, we can discuss these matters later. I'm asking you to come with me because there will be great benefits for you. The moment Shen Qiao's acupoints were cleared, he stood up and retreated until he was over 3 feet away from Yan Wushi. Please clarify more, sect leader Yan. Yan Wushi blinked at him and said, I won't keep you in suspense. In any case, you wanted to repay him too, didn't you? Surely there's no issue in coming with me to Chang'an for a look. My God, he's even pretending to be cute. Shen Qiao covered the injury to his chest, which was faintly throbbing in pain. He turned his head, unable to bear looking at him. He had yet to rid his mind of the man's imperious and offensive actions from earlier. Both anger and helplessness roiled within him. I can go with sect leader Yan, but we'll need to establish some guidelines and treat each other with proper etiquette. If sect leader Yan is unable to, I would rather go alone. And if I follow you, Yan Wushi thought, how would you get rid of me? But he only gave him a smile and generously agreed. We can. Chapter 108. 103. 330. Chapter 108. Sophistry. Yan Wushi continued teasing Shen Qiao, and his attitude changed day by day. Shen Qiao couldn't say that he was completely unaware, but truly, from the bottom of his heart, he didn't feel that he had any beauty or charm to speak of. Honey. I don't know if that's like a self-confidence issue or just like an awareness issue. Like, you're gorgeous. Don't you come at me with any beauty or charm to speak of. Okay, Chuan, right? I agree, Annika. For a man to live righteously in this world, the most important thing was his character. As for looks, women adored themselves for their admirers, and handsome men like Shoji or Song Yu also valued their appearances. However, Shen Qiao was a priest, so he had never placed any importance on such things. Hence, he didn't understand what Yan Wushi liked about him. Fine, fair point, but still, you're gorgeous. Due to these doubts, he interpreted Yan Wushi's attitude as a passing whim. After all, there had already been a precedent to this. If he left himself unguarded, he might end up being sold off again. Shen Qiao knew that he wasn't Yan Wushi's match when it came to scheming, and because of this, deep down inside, he was always afraid. A shred of suspicion remained constant within his heart, so he wouldn't dare believe Yan Wushi so easily. It's a little sad. Valid, but sad. In the end, Yan Wushi had brought this misfortune upon himself. Yes, he did. Back then, Shen Qiao had already regarded him as a friend. The heavens and earth could testify that his heart had been pure as ice, but Yan Wushi had sneered at him, then discarded him like a worn-out shoe. While speaking and smiling gently at him, he'd been in secret contact with San Jinxing, and in the blink of an eye, he'd presented Shen Qiao to him, then thrown Shen Qiao's sincere heart to the ground and stomped it into powder. I love how Shen Qiao hasn't noticed the trail of broken hearts left in his wake. He literally has a dude saying every time he meets him, "Let me paint you." Like, now he wished to salvage it, but a broken mirror was difficult to repair and spilled water impossible to recover. Perhaps he should have been considered fortunate that it was Shen Qiao he liked, for if anyone else had gone through what he had, even if they didn't undergo a drastic change in personality, they'd surely spend all day plotting revenge on Yan Wushi. At the very least, they wouldn't show Yan Wushi the slightest hint of trust or goodwill. But Shen Qiao was an exception. This man treated people with utmost sincerity. If someone showed him kindness, he would absolutely repay it 10 or even 12-fold. Outside the royal capital of Tuyuhun, Yan Wushi had developed multiple personalities due to his severe injuries. And due to the Chenggong incident, Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao had gone deep underground in Ruoqiang, which had resulted in various entanglements. Later, when Hehuan sect caught wind of the news and came to kill them, Yan Wushi had decisively chosen to use himself as bait and lure away their most dangerous enemy, San Jinxing. This had given Shen Qiao the room to escape. Though Shen Qiao knew very well that the cunning Yan Wushi wouldn't have gone in unprepared, he'd seen the other man's resolve as he left. He couldn't help being shaken by this. Even when Yan Wushi later recalled this move, he was very proud of it. With his heart now set on Shen Qiao, he wanted even more to explore this person's words and actions until he knew them inside and out and grasped them entirely. If anyone else had to put up with Yan Wushi's teasing and mocking and his many frivolous remarks, they would have been pondering how to best escape from him. That is, if they didn't just fly into a rage. However, Shen Qiao was different. To Shen Qiao, Yan Wushi had just saved him on Qingchang Mountain, so this kindness was one reason. Then there was Puliru Jian's letter begging for help. If Shen Qiao hadn't known, it'd be one thing, but now that he did know about it, he had to make the trip. So he and Yan Wushi shared the same destination anyway. This was the second reason. These two reasons together were much more important than, I don't want to get tangled up by this man's words and actions, so Shen Qiao would first put aside his personal feelings and prioritize what was truly important. This level of seriousness and rigor could make one look old-fashioned or even hypocritical. However, when it came to Shen Qiao, many people would feel that this was just the way things were, and that there was nothing contradictory about his character. Back when this person had been the Xuandu Mountain sect leader, his reputation hadn't been prominent. When others mentioned him, they would add at most one more sentence. Qi Fenggui's favorite disciple. Nothing else. Yet now that he had wandered the Jianghu, his identity as Shen Qiao was foremost in people's minds. Yan Wushi took much pride in spending most of his life free from the influence of others, that he lived carefree and unrestrained and did as he pleased. Never could he have imagined that ultimately this person would put an end to all of that. He'd always believed that human nature was evil, that true goodness didn't exist, that even if it did exist, it only looked like weakness when he saw it. And yet, Shen Qiao was an exception. Yan Wushi, who'd never compromised himself for anyone, was willing to concede a little for Shen Qiao's sake. Yan Wushi had never believed in the people the world thought were good, and he considered them beneath his contempt. And if Yan Wushi found someone he thought was good, and the people of the world thought so as well, he naturally had to snatch this person for himself first. Though, whether through extortion or by silently nurturing the relationship, he must first gather that person into his arms, then carefully tune them until the other party was finally won over. All in all, so far progress had been fairly smooth. Oh my goodness, I am stumbling. Even Yan Wushi couldn't help but feel quite satisfied with himself. His venerable self had been in the Jianghu for decades. Even if he didn't use his status or martial prowess to oppress others, there were countless men and women who'd clung to him for their own volition. There we go. This was the first time in his life that he had to put so much effort into someone. If he couldn't capture this person, then he'd have wasted the rest of his life. In that case, he might as well bash his head open and die. So, when Shen Qiao proposed his 3 rules of treat each other with courtesy, never disregard etiquette, and no frivolous behavior allowed, Yan Wushi naturally agreed. His easy agreement made Shen Qiao somewhat suspicious, but since he had already agreed, if he continued to pester him over it, Shen Qiao would come off as the unreasonable one. The next morning, the 2 of them set off on their journey. Whenever they happened to pass by a town at night, they would rest there. It was common for people of the Jianghu to brave the wind and dew, but if they had a choice, anyone would much rather have a warm and comfortable place to stay. Unless there was really no other option, even martial experts would prefer to stay at an inn. Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao were no exception. They traveled at a brisk pace, and in just 2 days they arrived in Xining town, not far from Chang'an. With Chang'an in sight, they could finally slow their pace somewhat. They'd be able to enter the city tomorrow. Though Puliuru Jian's situation is critical, it's not so urgent that we can't pause for a moment, said Yan Wushi. It's already evening, so let's rest here for now. Shen Qiao knew that Yan Wushi had always attached great importance to his appearance. Every time he showed up somewhere, his figure had to be dignified and majestic. There was no telling how much time he spent preparing himself. Of course, the Huanyue sect leader would refuse to enter the city travel-worn and caked in dust, so Shen Qiao agreed. They chose a fairly large inn, and the 2 of them walked inside. Shen Qiao was afraid that Yan Wushi would again say something about sleeping together, so when the innkeeper asked 2 separate rooms, he quickly stepped in front of Yan Wushi and replied, yes. Yan Wushi didn't refute him, but simply smiled happily and let him take the lead. Yan Wushi, the material girl. Yeah. Material girl! Yeah. The innkeeper couldn't help but smile and say, the 2 gentlemen here are brothers, correct? You're very close. We're not brothers, said Yan Wushi. Ah, said the innkeeper as he hesitated a little. Then, father and son? Yan Wushi didn't say anything, only smiled suggestively at him. Then he glanced at Shen Qiao, but before smiling again at the innkeeper. The shopkeeper had seen all types of people before, and dawning realization soon spread on his face. It can't be helped, Yan Wushi said. He's been difficult the past few days, and we haven't been getting along. The innkeeper was incredibly adaptable. They say, with 10 years of virtue, you'll share the same ship of destiny. With 100 years of virtue, you'll, So this is a Chinese idiom. Literally, after 10 years of virtue, you'll share the same ship crossing. After 100 years of virtue, you'll share a pillow. Yan Wushi absolutely believes in treating himself. I mean, he's got the funds. Might as well use them. As the two of you are dragons and phoenixes among men, your friendship is likely extraordinary as well. Since you already have this shared destiny, you should make some concessions to each other. You know what they say, amiability is the key to prosperity. Shen Qiao was silent. What do you mean, you know? Say it clearly. But the innkeeper had chosen to follow Yan Wushi's lead in being vague. Shen Qiao couldn't go and deliberately correct him. The denial would just make him look even more guilty. The innkeeper booked a room for them, but Yan Wushi requested another private room and ordered some food and wine to go with it. There were 4 dining tables in the private room, all arranged on one side. The other side was for performances, as guests could call for some singing and dancing to entertain them during dinner. There was no one dancing at the moment, though, making the room seem a bit empty. Shen Qiao sat down at the table by the door, but Yan Wushi didn't sit down at the next table over. Instead, he sat down at the table closest to the corner, leaving 2 tables in between them. Why do this, sect leader Yan? Shen Qiao didn't understand. The moment I saw your face, I wanted to touch it, but since I promised to treat you with courtesy, it's best if I stay away. Otherwise, you'll see me as a dishonest scoundrel again. Yan Wushi's words not only sounded innocent, they dripped with righteousness. Those who didn't know better would have thought that Shen Qiao was the one being indecent towards him. Shen Qiao was a bit speechless, and after a moment he recalled what had happened just now. You intentionally misled the innkeeper by saying those things. How is this treating each other with courtesy? Yan Wushi acted even more innocent. Oh, where was I being misleading? I only said 2 lines the entire time, and you heard them clearly too. We aren't brothers. Is there anything wrong with this sentence? Unless Qiao actually wants to be my brother. And the second sentence is even more faultless, is it not? What is there to argue about? The shopkeeper had indecent thoughts, so he came to an indecent conclusion. You can't blame me for that. Shen Qiao already possessed a profound understanding of Yan Wushi's knack for verbal debates. Hearing this, he only felt a sense of helplessness. Yan Wushi smiled. I've done everything you requested. Why are you still unsatisfied? After a pause, he spoke softly again. Qiao, there aren't many people who can receive my venerable regard in this lifetime. There are even fewer people for whom I'd make concessions. You are the only one. Within the softness was a hint of steel. Underneath the gentle words lay an unyielding stubbornness. It was truly enough to leave a person at the end of their rope. Shen Qiao frowned. I would rather not be that special. That's not up to you. Yan Wushi smiled but did not answer. Shen Qiao thought for a moment and solemnly said, Sect leader Yan's intentions are unpredictable, truly difficult to fathom. And I know even less how my exceedingly ordinary qualifications managed to attract Sect leader Yan's attention. Since we're being candid today, can I please ask Lord Yan to speak honestly on this matter? Qiao, you have many good qualities. So many that I wouldn't be able to list them all, even if I spoke for 3 days and 3 nights. He'd begun with a joke. Seeing Shen Qiao speechless, he smiled and said, "Just in your soft-heartedness alone, no one in this world can compare to you." I don't know that being soft-hearted I don't know when being soft-hearted became a good quality, said Shen Qiao glumly. I only remember that sect leader Yan has always detested those that are kind and soft-hearted. Yan Wushi gave an easy smile. What else would they say? In your lover's eyes, you become she, she, shy, shy, she. So, one of the renowned four beauties of ancient China. Shy, she. Yeah. All right. So basically, Shen Qiao had been tricked again. He knew he wouldn't be able to get a straight answer out of Yan Wushi. He was even more certain now that the other man was just acting on a whim, which meant there were only two paths ahead for Shen Qiao. The first was to wait for Yan Wushi's interest to subside so that he'd stop pestering him. Then his ears would finally know peace. Alternately, he could wait until he could surpass Yan Wushi in martial arts, then pummel him flat. That way, Yan Wushi wouldn't dare to pester him anymore. Dude, he'd like it. He would pester you more if you kicked his ass. Let's be real. He's got a little bit of that sadist, masochist energy right there. Like, he's got a mix of both. It's very interesting. I'm not sure which one he's more of, if I'm being honest. The wine and food were served, and both of them fell silent and began to eat. Halfway through the meal, Yan Wushi took a sip of wine and smiled. If you like someone, must you say a reason? It's like when you hate someone to the point that their face fills you with disgust, but you can't say why. Isn't that the same thing? Just because I enjoy teasing you doesn't mean you can treat my sincerity as fake. My heart won't be able to take it. Yep, he'd enjoy that fight way too much. At first, those words sounded rather earnest, but it was just more twisted logic. Why is it so difficult to have a proper conversation with this person? Shen Qiao thought. The words he wanted to say turned in his stomach a few times, and just as he was about to say them, he heard a slight sound coming from Yan Wushi's table. He couldn't help but raise his head just in time to see Yan Wushi's head drop low as he coughed up blood. Shen Qiao's face contorted in horror. All else flew from his mind as he hurriedly leapt up to support him. What's wrong? Was the wine poisoned? As Shen Qiao hadn't touched the jug of wine, he immediately thought that the wine was the issue. And because this reminded him of his own experience with Joyful Reunion, his complexion looked even worse than Yan Wushi's. But then Yan Wushi suddenly smiled and pulled him into his arms. Your panic reveals your concerns, Xiao. Your words truly don't match your heart. Shen Qiao stared at him. You weren't poisoned? Yan Wushi wiped the blood stain from the corner of his lips and said, I accidentally bit my lip while chewing. I might have been too agitated. Agitated to the point of vomiting blood? To hell with your lies! Yeah, great way to piss off your sweetie. Man, we're very blessed. We got another picture. My goodness. Shameless. I love embarrassed Shen Qiao's face. And Yan Wushi. They're so cute right now. Like, he is definitely pissed off. I like Yan Wushi's soft eyes, though. Yeah, oh my. Get off me, skunk man. They are. It is. I definitely agree that they're adorable even if they're fighting. Okay. 125. Pepe Le Pew. Pepe Le Pew definitely had a lot of riz towards what was he trying to riz up the cat, or was it another skunk? It's been a long time since I saw anything with Pepe Le Pew. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. She did. 109. Hostages. Realizing Yan Wushi had tricked him by pretending to vomit blood, Shen Qiao refused to say a single word to Yan Wushi the rest of the way to Chang'an and the Duke of Su's residence. He's like, I can't win an argument with you, so I'm not even going to try. You don't get the joy of arguing with me. In his heart, the man and the word cunning were already irreversibly linked. His mind held more schemes than a honeycomb had cells. Shen Qiao knew that even if he used every trick he had, he still wouldn't be Yan Wushi's match. Hence, silence was golden. He simply refused to speak. No matter what Yan Wushi said, Shen Qiao only answered with or oh. He refused to believe that the man could find any openings this way. Don't underestimate him. I'm sure he will. He'll probably say something ridiculous, and you will unintentionally say, and yep. Yan Wushi also knew that he'd gone too far. Though he'd forced Shen Qiao to show his concern with his moment of panic, no one enjoyed being embarrassed. Even with someone as good-natured as Shen Qiao, exposing them like that would, of course, make them angry. It'd be stranger if he wasn't angry. Chang'an was the same as always, with its tall city walls and majestic grandeur. Thousands of sights combined into a single scene, truly worthy of its status as the imperial capital. Shen Qiao had never seen such a stolid, awe-inspiring aura in even the capital of Southern Dynasty, Jiankang. Jiankang could be considered as the capital of several dynasties. It had been established since the time of Sun Wu during the Three Kingdoms era. The palace had 3 outer walls and 3 inner walls, with the river Qinhuai to the south and the lake Hao Hu to the north. When Yuan Yang entrusted Yan Wushi with escorting Shou envoys to the southern dynasty, Shen Qiao had also stayed in Jiankang. Comparing the two capitals, Jiankang had more splendor and charm, but lacked Chang'an's power and gravity. There was a saying that the presence of kingly qi determines the location of the capital. For where the kingly qi resides, the dragon's vein, the flow of fortune, will be found. These words carried a strong whiff of superstition, but there was a grain of truth in them. Though Taoists didn't practice divination, some cursory dabbling was inevitable, and Shen Qiao, too, knew a thing or two about observing and interpreting qi. Back then, when he'd examined Yuan Yang's chi and complexion, he'd felt that Yuan Yang didn't have much longer to live. Now, when comparing Jian Kong with Cheng En, he also felt that the former was a little lacking in kingly chi compared to the latter. Perhaps it was this little gap that could determine a dynasty's fate. But such talk of the supernatural was better kept to himself. Even if the emperor believed them, few emperors would actually move their capital over something like this. Ultimately, a dynasty's fortunes relied on correct timing, geographical advantages, and human harmony. None of these could be missing. Now that the Xiao dynasty had lost Yuan Yang, what use was the correct timing and geographical advantage? They were already pointless. The yellow flowers of tomorrow. Why is Ah Qiao's expression so grave? Yan Wushi's voice sounded from behind him, destroying the mood. Shen Qiao didn't even want to acknowledge him. He pretended he'd heard nothing. Hi, Lil. You did manage to make it. We are actually on the second to last chapter from the end. You missed the great battle, but that's okay. Yan Wushi kept his bright smile despite being given the cold shoulder. There was no hint of displeasure. He followed Shen Qiao and entered the city. Shen Qiao, protecting Yuan Song while fighting his way out of the siege, had left a deep impression on the people. He hadn't even changed his attire for this visit. He was still dressed in blue Taoist robe, a long sword on his back. With his exceptional face, even the guards immediately recognized him. They watched helplessly as he casually entered the city. Not a single one had the courage to stop or interrogate him. You're ridiculous. Most people would admire the truly capable. Shen Qiao's actions that day had been so dazzling, even the low-ranking foot soldiers who'd participated in the siege felt nothing but heartfelt respect for this Taoist priest. After all, he'd managed to escape from a city full of archers and countless martial experts using only his own strength. Though they'd later heard the emperor had been furious over failing to kill his uncle's entire family, having let his younger cousin escape like a fish from a net, they all privately gave Shen Qiao a thumbs up. Accounts of that brilliant battle had long been pieced into a story that was circulating around the markets. The common folk might not have heard of the world's #1 martial artist, Qi Fengwei, but they definitely knew of this supremely righteous and powerful Taoist master Shen. But Chang'an was Chang'an, not anywhere else. Since entering the city, countless eyes and ears had been alerted to their presence. However, Yan Wushi showed no concern, nor did he alert Shen Qiao. He simply took him straight to the junior preceptor's residence in the city. The Huan Yue sect had lost its influence. Yan Wushi was not a court criminal. Shen Qiao had fled with Yuan Song, but Yuan Yun had come to the conclusion that a single 7 to 8-year-old child couldn't cause too much trouble. In any case, he spent all day indulging in pleasure, so he lacked the time to concern himself with other matters and didn't bother to pursue them further. Thus, though these two people had entered the city and attracted all sorts of attention, no one came to arrest them. One reason was that there was no legitimate reason to do so, and the second was that even if anyone wanted to arrest them, they wouldn't have been able to do so. Fantastic reasoning. Ever since the new emperor's ascension to the throne, the junior preceptor's residence had been sealed off. The gates were locked and covered with paper seals. Yan Wushi gently tugged at them with both hands, and even the heavy chains snapped with a clang, to say nothing of the seals. He pushed the gates and entered. The sight of his complete disregard for the court's ban made Shen Qiao's mouth twitch as he watched. Was this because he'd already resolved to support Pulier Jian, so he saw no need to avoid suspicion, even in broad daylight? Shen Qiao wanted to ask, but after opening his mouth, he restrained himself. Yan Wushi didn't look back, but it was like he had eyes on the back of his head, for he said, "At the sword trial conference, He Huan's sect went to harass Chunyang Monastery, and Sun Jingxing and Yuan Shushu must have been injured in the ensuing scuffle. The handful of small fries remaining aren't even worth mentioning. Currently in Chang'an, the only one worthy of my concern is Shu Ting. But that old bald donkey relies too much on the Buddhist orthodoxy and clings to his face, so he can't do anything underhanded like espionage. As for Yuan Yun, I'm also used to instruct him when he was the crown prince. He knew he couldn't provoke me, and in any case, he was only interested in having fun. He would never act recklessly until he was completely certain. If someone were to accuse me in front of him, he'd just turn a blind eye." Yeah. He really is just good luck keeping me out of anywhere. More so, try to stop me. I dare you. Shen Qiao frowned. From what Yan Wushi was saying, Yuan Yun also didn't seem entirely incompetent. But to annihilate his uncle's family right after ascending the throne, these actions were truly chilling. Yan Wushi seemed to notice his thoughts again. Yuan Yun elevates Buddhism, but he also brought in Yi Huan's sect. He clearly doesn't want the Buddhist discipline to be the sole dominant faction, and he does have some skills when it comes to controlling his subordinates. He was able to disperse the various sources of power over multiple factions. If he truly lacked competence, he couldn't have kept up the act in front of Yuan Yang for so many years without being deposed. But there are the limits of his abilities. If Yuan Yang had listened to me and established Yuan Xian as ruler instead, the Shou dynasty could have enjoyed 3 more generations of stability. Shen Qiao hadn't expected that Yan Wushi would have suggested that to Yuan Yang. No wonder Yuan Yun had immediately targeted Huan Yue's sect upon ascending to the throne. He probably loathed Yan Wushi to the bone. Unfortunately, this emperor didn't use his smarts on official matters, instead wasting it on pointless things. At present, the Gokturk Khaganate was in the north, while the southern dynasty was in the south. Even the conquest of the north itself had been due to the late emperor. However, a normal emperor, even one who didn't want to unify the lands eventually, wouldn't do something like abdicating the throne for his son and taking the position of emperor emeritus instead. Even when Shen Qiao was in Xinang town, he'd heard about the emperor's large-scale construction of imperial gardens, as well as about him engaging in inappropriate behaviors with his concubines and palace maids in broad daylight. If Yuan Yang in the underworld found out that his son was ruining the empire that he'd spent decades of blood, sweat, and tears on in this way, he'd probably come back to life out of sheer rage. Yan Wushi added, Yuan Xian was weak, but he was skilled with military administration, as well as an excellent commander. Even if he couldn't have inherited Yuan Yang's legacy, he wouldn't have squandered the family's wealth entirely. Unfortunately, Yuan Yang couldn't break free from the shackles of tradition and insisted on his son inheriting the throne. His vision was far too narrow and shallow. He labored his entire life and ended up being killed by his son, and all his hard work has come to nothing. Such misfortune he brought upon himself. He showed little respect for the previous emperor, his criticisms flowing forth the moment he opened his mouth. Anyone else hearing this would have been terrified out of their wits, but Shen Qiao couldn't help but internally roll his eyes. He thought, didn't you get ambushed by those martial experts in the capital of Tuyuhun? You even ended up with a crack in your skull and almost lost your life. You call Yuan Yang shallow, but where was your foresight then? Yan Wushi didn't even have to turn back as he joked. Ah, Qiao, I didn't expect you, an upright gentleman, to develop the bad habit of silently cursing someone behind his back. That's not good. Shen Qiao knew Yan Wushi was trying to provoke him into talking, but this only made him clam up more. By now, the two of them had already passed through the atrium and arrived in the backyard. Shen Qiao didn't know why Yan Wushi had brought him here, but looking at the surrounding vegetation and furnishings, there was no sign of the neglect or disarray that should come from the owner's absence. Instead, everything was neatly maintained, indicating that someone had been coming over frequently to take care of the place. Yet the seals and locks outside had been untouched, which was rather intriguing. Yan Wushi pushed open a door to the house, but inside wasn't empty. Several people were waiting. Upon their arrival, those people all stood up to greet them. The person in the middle took a few steps forward and cupped his hands, saying, I heard that sect leader Yan had encountered many crises while outside lately. Alas, I am not from the Jianghu and was unable to help at all. It is fortunate that you are safe and sound. I can finally lay my worries to rest. He then greeted Shen Qiao and said, Taoist Master Shen was utterly brilliant that day, practically unforgettable. The people of Chang'an are still discussing it with relish even now. Seeing you again, your magnificence has only increased. This man was an old acquaintance, so Shen Qiao naturally recognized him. Moreover, Yan Wushi had already mentioned him in advance, so he'd come mentally prepared. Now he also cupped his hands and smiled. Duke of Su, he greeted. I heard that when I left the capital with Qilan that day, the Duke of Su had been secretly assisting us, and that's why we were able to escape safely. This humble Taoist has yet to thank the Duke of Su for this. Pulieru Jian gave a hearty laugh. I only lifted a finger. No need to let it linger on your mind. He introduced the person with him to Shen Qiao. This is Zhang Yi, a senior official from the Department of Internal History. And there was another person here who needed no introduction but was also an old acquaintance. Yan Wushi's eldest disciple, Bian Mei. The moment Yan Wushi had entered, Bian Mei had come forward and bowed. When he saw Shen Qiao looking at him, he smiled and cupped his hands at him as well. Despite Yan Wushi's pride, he dispensed with his usual posturing and spoke pleasantly to Pulieru Jian. While outside, I received a letter from Dalong saying that there was some trouble on your end. Everyone took a seat, and Pulieru Jian gave a bitter smile. Yes, there has indeed been some trouble. I've thought long and hard, but still cannot find a way, so I can only presumptuously bother sect leader Yan. Yuan Yun was rather lacking when it came to governing the country, but he was quite adept with tactics for protecting his imperial power. After killing several of his uncles in succession, he turned his attention to his officials. The first to receive his attention was his own father-in-law, the Duke of Su, Pulieru Jian. Pulieru Jian wasn't Yuan Xian. He refused to simply sit and wait for death, or perhaps he'd already intended to revolt. Faced with an emperor like Yuan Yun, he couldn't possibly be happy to submit himself and serve as his minister. Therefore, though he appeared respectful on the surface, he'd been making many preparations in secret. First, he'd contacted the military to attempt to take over the remnants of Yuan Xian's troops. After Yuan Xian's death, those who were originally loyal to him had been subject to the emperor's suspicions and oppression, leaving them in a state of constant fear. When they saw Pulieru Jian offering an olive branch, they naturally rushed to take it. As Pulieru Jian worked, many people in the court also fell to his side, becoming the backbone of his faction. Zhang Yi was one of them. However, Yuan Yun was not completely unaware. Pulieru Jian's daughter was Yuan Yun's empress. Yuan Yun was unable to grasp any of Pulieru Jian's weaknesses, and so his attitude towards the empress had deteriorated. He would verbally abuse and browbeat her at every turn, even threatening her with death several times. It was only thanks to Puliurujian's wife, Lady Dugu, entering the palace and pleading for mercy that she'd narrowly escaped with her life. Puliurujian sighed. A few days ago, it was the Empress's birthday. His Majesty had no intention of arranging any grand celebrations, but only bestowed a few gifts on her and allowed my wife to visit. However, a message came from the palace saying that the Empress wanted to see her brothers. So my wife brought our first and second sons into the palace to celebrate her birthday. But after she met with the Empress, someone lured my wife away with an excuse, and when she returned, she was told that the Empress missed her brothers and wished to have them stay for a meal. My wife asked to see the Empress, but to no avail, so she pleaded with His Majesty and was expelled from the palace. Since then, I have seen neither the Empress nor my sons. I did all I could, but His Majesty refuses to let anyone go. I don't even know if they're alive or dead. In other words, 2 of Puliurujian's sons and one of his daughters had been taken hostage by Yuan Yun. Puliurujian had 5 sons. The eldest, one of the sons who'd been taken to the palace, was only 9 years old. Jeez. At this point, his face was filled with distress, his earnest love for his sons pouring into his words. I've done everything I could. I even begged His Majesty, but he wouldn't let anyone go. He insists that it was my sons who wanted to remain in the palace so that they could keep the Empress company. Buddhist Master Shu Ting is watching over the palace, and martial experts have gathered there like storm clouds. If I use force, I can't guarantee that my children will remain unharmed. I never imagined that Yuan Yun would suddenly launch an attack. Even resorting to a method like this, I truly have no alternative but to beg sect leader Yan for help. The room was so quiet one could have heard a pin drop. Yan Wushi smiled a little and said with perfect composure, I'll put it bluntly. All the necessary preparations are complete. Duke of Su, you need only wait for the perfect opportunity. Even without those 2 sons, you still have 3, so it doesn't hinder the overall situation. As long as you remain firm, Yuan Yun cannot use this to threaten you. Chapter 10. Yeah. Definitely cold. 147:30. All right, chapter 110. A grand gift. These words were full of Yan Wushi's characteristic callous ruthlessness. Throughout the ages, he was saying, those with great accomplishments could abandon even their parents and disregard their siblings, never mind their children. Yeah, you're right where it's going, Annika. In any case, these 2 weren't Puliurujian's only sons. He had another 3. Moreover, Puliurujian was in his prime, so having more sons and daughters wouldn't be difficult. There was no need to have his hands tied just because 2 of his sons were in Yuan Yun's hands. He should still do what he had to do. Though Shen Qiao didn't agree with these words, he didn't find them strange or unexpected. He knew that this was the kind of person that Yan Wushi was. On the contrary, the various special treatments he'd been getting from Yan Wushi lately were far more disturbing and bizarre. That's kind of fucked up. Like, I get it. Kind of fucked up. You're being nice to me and it's weird. Other than Shen Qiao, Zhang Yi and Bian Mei were also present. Yan Mei was Yan Wushi's disciple and a demonic practitioner. His methods were also unconventional and unpredictable, so he wouldn't see anything inappropriate in what Yan Wushi said. As Zhang Yin was considered a trusted confidant by Pulier Jian, he couldn't have been too gentle a person either. So, though he said nothing, he also agreed with Yan Wushi's words. You haven't touched my last nerve lately. Are you okay? Yeah. Pulier Jian smiled bitterly. Though those with great achievements do not concern themselves with trivial details, how can I forsake my own flesh and blood so easily? Emperor Gao Zhu of Han asked Xiang Yu to share the meat soup made from his father's flesh. I can't do that. If I can abandon even my own kin, I trust that sect leader Yan would also look down on me, would he not? It was indeed a canny statement. Though he was clearly asking for Yan Wushi's help in rescuing his children, he managed to give off an impression that was both devoted and righteous. An emperor as kind and soft as Yuan Xian would naturally be able to achieve very little, but one like Gao Jian, who disposed of subjects the moment their purpose was fulfilled, would instead be too horrifying. Puliero Jian was offering reassurance to his followers, implying that he would never forget their kindness in the future either. Dude, Yan Wushi would look down on you no matter what. Yeah, you're not wrong, Truffle. You're not wrong. Shen Qiao vaguely understood why Yan Wushi had changed to supporting Puliu Jian. Yan Wushi smiled for a moment, but he didn't continue the topic of whether to rescue them or not. Instead, he said, Are you sure that they're still alive inside the palace? Puliu Jian understood that this was Yan Wushi tacitly promising to save them, so he quickly collected his spirits and said, I am sure. The Empress risked her life to secretly send someone to us with a letter, saying that His Majesty had detained my sons in the Empress's palace and that the Empress herself is under house arrest and cannot leave. It's already been more than 10 days. I think that His Majesty wants to use them as hostages to prevent me from acting rashly. Carrying out a rebellion wasn't like eating food or drinking water. Though Puliu Jian had already made many preparations, he hadn't completely made up his mind before this development. If anything, the Emperor's coercion had forced out his determination. The moment his children were saved, he'd launch a coup without a second thought. To rescue your children, you need to be prepared to turn against Yuan Yun, said Yan Wushi. There are people from the Buddhist sects overseeing the palace, and Yuan sect has members there as well. Even if they can't defeat me, there's little to stop them from killing your children out of spite. Puliu Jian sighed. Yes, this has been weighing me down on my mind as well. I'm feeling quite anxious. Does sect leader Yan have any good ideas? Yan Wushi pondered for a moment. Yuan Yun refused to let anyone go, but in the end, he hasn't turned on you in public, he said. You can send gifts to your children as a pretext for entering the palace, then wait for an opportunity to save them. This is the only way. Yan Mei quickly understood. This disciple is willing to accept this task. I can disguise myself and sneak into the palace, then wait for the opportunity to rescue someone. Surprisingly, Yan Wushi rejected him. Your martial arts are still lacking. If you end up facing Shu Ting, only death awaits you. Yan Mei rubbed his nose, but went silent. Meanwhile, my stature is too eye-catching, said Yan Wushi, and I've never practiced the bone-shrinking technique. If I disguise myself, maybe others won't notice anything unusual, but that bald old donkey Shu Ting would surely see right through it. It would only backfire. If we wish to save those boys, we must find an exceptional martial artist who is able to adapt to the situation accordingly. When the time comes, I'll coordinate with them from outside the palace. To Puliurujian, Bianyame was already a powerful martial artist, but Yan Wushi had deemed him insufficient, saying that they needed better. If they had to prepare for the possibility of fighting Shu Tang, then they needed a Grandmaster-level martial expert. However, Grandmasters didn't grow out of the ground like cabbages, and Puliurujian wasn't the emperor yet either. Even if he were, he'd still have to treat this hypothetical martial artist with extra courtesy and respect. Where could he find one on such short notice? Hint, hint. When several pairs of eyes fell on him, Shen Qiao gave a sigh. This humble Taoist lacks talent, he said gently, but saving someone's life is worth 1,000 merits. I would be willing to try, but I'm not familiar with the palace's layout. Once I'm inside, I'll be as good as blind. You did pretty good when you were blind, so, that's not a fair comparison. I fear that I might lose my way before I can rescue anyone. Puliurujian had just been considering Shen Qiao, but this was different from asking for help from Yan Wushi. He shared no deep friendship with Shen Qiao, so if he didn't offer, Puliurujian couldn't be so shameless as to ask. Now that Shen Qiao had volunteered, he was naturally overjoyed. Taoist Master Shen taking the field is more than Jian could ask for, he said. But infiltrating the palace will be terribly treacherous. Though I am worried for my loved ones, I dare not rashly put Taoist Master Shen in danger. I've heard that on Buddha's birthday, the 8th of April, Shu Ting will head to the city's Qingliang temple to pray for blessings. With him gone, the remaining forces should be much easier to deal with. At that time, I will send more people to accompany Taoist Master Shen. First, to lead the way, then second as backup in case something goes wrong. They can also serve as your helpers. Quality over quantity, said Bianyame. Let me accompany Taoist Master Shen into the palace, as I'm also familiar with its layout. Then sending just 2 more maids will be enough. Yuan Yun isn't a fool. If there are too many people, he will also grow suspicious. Shen Qiao nodded and said nothing more. After further discussion of the time and location, both parties agreed that Puliurujian should first submit a letter requesting to visit. If Yuan Yun refused, they would enter the palace to deliver gifts under the name of the Empress's mother, Lady Dugu. Shen Qiao and the others arranged to meet on the 7th of April at the Duke of Su's residence, where they would disguise themselves as servants from the Duke of Su's residence, who were visiting the Empress. Inside, they'd wait for the opportunity to stage the rescue. By now, the news had doubtlessly already been reported that Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao had entered the junior preceptor's mansion, thus ignoring the ban and trespassing. They couldn't remain here for too long. After the matter was decided, everyone dispersed. Puliurujian followed a secret passage out of the junior preceptor's residence and returned to the Duke of Su's residence, while Bianyame brought Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao to another residence in the city. The residence was not the one Shen Qiao had lived in, but another one that he'd never set foot in before. The wily rabbit has 3 burrows. The demonic practitioners, especially Huan Yue's sect, exemplified this, saying, Shen Qiao suspected that Bianyame had secretly bought as many as 10 residences as contingencies, and when one was discovered, he'd abandon that one and relocate to the next. In any case, Huan Yue's sect had made a lot of money back when Yuan Yang had supported them, and even now they still ran numerous businesses. While they didn't operate on as large a scale as the Liu He Guild, Yan Wushi certainly wasn't lacking in wealth. Bianyame introduced the building to them. This is a private residence under the surname Li. To the outside world, it is a merchant's residence, so Huan's sect won't be able to find this place for the time being. Shizun and Taoist Master Shen can rest assured. He didn't know what kind of relationship Shen Qiao had with his Shifu now. Close friends? He didn't look like it, and with his master's temperament, forget about Shen Qiao. Even if the world's #1 martial artist wanted to be his friend, Yan Wushi might still consider it pointless. Yan Mei still remembered that his master had always brought Shen Qiao along with him, but only to amuse himself. There had been no sense of friendship between them. Yan Mei's powers of observation were much sharper than those of his Shidi, Yu Shengyan. He was naturally able to see that Yan Wushi's treatment of Shen Qiao was highly unusual and very different from before. But he couldn't say exactly what the difference was. Even if he racked his brains, he couldn't imagine his own Shifu having such thoughts. Though Shen Qiao was gentle and handsome, it was impossible to imagine him as a kept man being showered in favors. Besides, Liu Li Palace had just released the rankings of the martial artists throughout the land, and Taoist Master Shen had ranked in the top 10. Who in the world dared to harbor impure intentions towards martial grandmasters? Yan Wushi dared. But Yan Mei didn't expect his master to dare. In any case, since Yan Wushi was showing Shen Qiao special regard, someone as artful as Yan Mei could never snub Shen Qiao. And though he took after his Shifu and his own lack of scruples, he held genuine admiration for Shen Qiao's character within his heart. There were many scoundrels and hypocrites in this world, and no shortage of people who appeared to be morally upright gentlemen, but in truth were unable to control themselves in the face of temptation. Yan Mei was from the Jianghu, but he also served in the imperial court of the northern Zhou for many years. He'd met all types of people. One such as Shen Qiao could truly be called a person who practiced what he preached. His actions and conscience were one. As they spoke, the Duke of Su's residence had secretly sent someone over to deliver something, and it was addressed to Shen Qiao. Huan Yue's sect was allied with the Duke of Su, so they naturally knew about this location as well, allowing for convenient communication at any time. Shen Qiao didn't know what it was, so when he opened the bamboo tube, removed the contents, and opened it up to take a look, he let out a quiet gasp of surprise. And Wushi glanced at him and smiled. Puliru Jian is truly a clever, incisive man. This object was one of the Zhu Yang strategy's 5 scrolls, the one originally concealed within the inner palace of northern Zhou. Yan Wushi had read this Zhu Yang strategy scroll in the past, but at the time he'd already realized that its contents were mostly incompatible with the Feilin scriptures, so he hadn't committed it to memory. Later, after his feelings for Shen Qiao had grown, he'd roughly told him about everything he remembered. However, that couldn't compare to having the complete original delivered to him. Now, with the exception of the scroll in Tiantai sect, Shen Qiao had obtained full knowledge of the Zhu Yang strategy's contents. The feeling we are somehow going to find the other one way or another, in probably a very convoluted situation. Although the Zhu Yang strategy scrolls were precious, Yuan Yun wasn't a martial artist. After he'd poisoned and killed his father, the court had experienced a great flood of changes. Yuan Yun hadn't had the time to pay attention to this kind of thing, nor had he cared to. Puliru Jian had taken advantage of his status to have his daughter smuggle the scroll out of the palace during the chaos. He had stored the scroll away until now, when he had given it to Shen Qiao. Having received such a valuable gift, Shen Qiao naturally had to acknowledge his favor because Puliru Jian conducted himself brilliantly. He hadn't waited until the task was complete to present this gift. Instead, he delivered it in advance, expressing his own faith in Shen Qiao's character and his confidence that Shen Qiao wouldn't break his promises. Now, no matter how dangerous the palace would be, Shen Qiao would have to go, and he'd do so willingly without a shred of reluctance. So this was why Yan Wushi had said Puliru Jian was judicious, with an excellent grasp on how to conduct himself socially. Shen Qiao suddenly realized something. Before, you said that meeting with Puliurujian would bring great benefits, he said. Is this what you meant? Did you expect Puliurujian to give me the Shuyang strategy scroll? Yan Wushi smiled. I'm not a god or an immortal. How could I possibly predict the future? But the scroll was with Puliurujian, and I knew that if he wanted your help, he'd at least have to show you his sincerity. The full recovery of her martial arts appears imminent, but since the entire Zhu strategy shares the same source, as long as any part is missing, it'll ultimately remain flawed. Perhaps you might have missed some key point, which isn't conductive to cultivation. Even if this incident hadn't occurred, I'd have gotten the scroll from him anyway and given it to you. Shen Qiao couldn't help but send him a glance. If Yan Wushi wanted to be good to someone, he wouldn't just be good, he'd be exceptional. He would offer them the entire world's treasures and openly tell them, I'm willing to do this for you. Noticing Shen Qiao's gaze, Yan Wushi smiled slightly and said, Ah, Qiao, there's no need to be so moved. I've already told you about this volume's contents. Puliurujian's gesture now is just an extra touch, like adding flowers to brocade. Next time, I'll give you something even better, and you can save being moved until then. Shen Qiao truly wanted to collapse with laughter at this man's shamelessness. He quickly withdrew his gaze, afraid that Yan Wushi would come up with something even more horrifying to say. On the 7th of April, as agreed upon, Yan Wushi, Shen Qiao, and Bian Yanmei arrived at the Duke of Su's residence. Puliurujian had already submitted a request to allow Lady Dugu to visit their daughter in the palace, and it was indeed rejected by the emperor. Puliurujian then wrote another memorial stating that though Lady Dugu was unable to visit the empress in the palace, the love between mother and child was strong, so she hoped to gift the empress some food and letters from home as a token of a mother's longing for her children. Perhaps the emperor did not wish to make his disagreement with the Duke of Su public, for this time he agreed. Puliurujian picked 2 intelligent and capable maids, then made preparations for them to accompany Shen Qiao and Bian Yanmei into the palace. When Shen Qiao saw the attire he was to wear to enter the palace, his expression darkened. Turning to Yan Wushi, he said, Why didn't you tell me you wanted me to dress up as a woman? Yan Wushi looked surprised and asked him his own question in return. How could an outsider casually enter the palace, let alone the imperial harem? I thought you already knew. Shen Qiao was at a loss for words. He's at a loss for words a lot this time. He felt that Yan Wushi was probably still holding a grudge for the time Shen Qiao had dressed him up as a woman, but Yan Wushi's reasoning sounded so insincerely dignified that he couldn't refute him. It's all right, Bian Yanmei consoled him. I will also be wearing women's clothing. They were already at this point. Since Shen Qiao had agreed to help, he naturally couldn't renege. He could only accept his fate and let the maids change his clothes and then start dabbing makeup on his face. The maid who put on his makeup was not an ordinary maid, but a disciple of Huan Yue sect brought here by Bian Yanmei. She had some insights into disguising oneself and changing one's appearance. Previously, Shen Qiao had thought that disguise techniques were all like the kind Huo Shijing used, where one would directly cover their face with a human skin mask, then use some secret technique after, but Bian Yanmei told him that this was not the case. Huo Shijing's face-changing technique requires the use of countless medicinal herbs to first process the human skin, then more secret techniques to refine it further, he explained. It would take over half a year to complete. At first, we don't have the time, and second, I don't know what kind of secret technique it is. Third, the mask must fit the wearer well. The contours have to match. There are many requirements. If there's even a slight discrepancy, others will easily notice the flaws, and it won't look convincing at all. So, it's better to use other methods. The maid smiled as she painted Shen Qiao's face. This Taoist master is already so handsome and beautiful. With just some slight embellishments, he will make a beauty capable of toppling nations. Qiao was baffled. Unlike women, men have a protrusion in their throats which can't be concealed no matter how high the collar is. Anyone paying attention would see through it at once. How will you hide it? The maid smiled brightly. Just leave things to us, Taoist master. Beside him, Yan Mei gave them a reminder. Don't make Taoist Master Shen too beautiful. It'd be terrible if the Emperor takes a liking to him. Foreshadowing? I think so. Shen Qiao was speechless. There he is, speechless again. The maid sputtered a laugh. There's nothing we can do about that, she said. No matter how hard we try, we can't cover up the Taoist Master's bearing itself. At best, we can only make his face look a bit more ordinary. After finishing up their faces and necks, they brought 2 sets of maid's attire from the Duke of Su's residence for Shen Qiao and Yan Mei to change into. The preparations were all finished, but there was an uneasiness to Shen Qiao's expression. Yan Mei, on the other hand, was confident and unperturbed. He even playfully imitated the way maids covered their mouths, thumb and middle fingers touching in an awkward gesture as he giggled. Shen Jiji, look, aren't I pretty? The corner of Shen Qiao's mouth twitched. So, that is the end, but we got a bonus picture of Shen Qiao dressed like a very pretty lady and being very embarrassed about it. I'm going to zoom in a little so we can see their faces. Like how Yan Mei is completely unbothered. He's like, yep, whatever. The maids are having a great time. Very regal. He really is too pretty. What a way to end book 4. I'm very much looking forward to starting book 5. Focus on me, camera. Thank you. Book 5 next week. It will be our usual schedule. So Tuesday, 8 o'clock. And I hope everyone enjoyed and has a wonderful weekend. I am looking forward to seeing how this goes because I have a feeling shenanigans are going to occur and it will be a garbage fire like it always is whenever they scheme. But we will have to wait and see next week. To everyone watching tonight or watching later, thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening and a wonderful weekend. Goodbye and good night. Stay healthy, everybody.